Hi friends, welcome to Benchmark Unit 7, Week 1. I am Miss Cosmos, and today we are going to be making a plan for a historical narrative, or for writing a historical fiction or made-up story. Being that it's a historical narrative, it is a made-up story. However, it needs to have details in it to make it a story that could have actually happened during a certain time in history. And so since we're doing the Transcontinental Railroad, our historical narrative is going to be based in that time. So for this week, all we're doing is filling out our story map or our plan. Now, if you don't have one of these, that's okay. Just get a lined piece of paper and make sure that you have the title, characters, author setting, problem solution, beginning, middle, and end, okay? So what we're going to start with first, there are a couple of things that are non-negotiable for this, which means they're not an option. They kind of have to be done this way. Since we're talking about the Transcontinental Railroad, our setting, when and where this happens, is kind of locked in. So our when has to be between 1827 and 1869. So 1827 is when people really start building the railroads, and then 1869 is when the Transcontinental Railroad is completed. So our story has to take place sometime in between these 2 years. The other thing is the place. So you have a couple of different options. So the railroad ran their New York through California. Now, the Transcontinental Railroad, I believe, started in Missouri and went to California, but there were other railroads being built during this time. So you could have it set in New York. There's also Chicago and Florida. So you have some different options. You could have it run all the way from New York to California. Maybe your story is somebody who's traveling or building railroads all over, or maybe you're just in one of these locations and focusing on one particular railroad or one storyline that's happening around this time. So next we need to move to our characters, and we're going to do our characters before we do our title, because your characters are going to kind of determine what your title will be, or what kind of title you're going to have. So there are two options for your story. One of them is where you write about a businessman or a rail tycoon, somebody who either was born rich and they used their money to maybe help build the railroad, or somebody who was poor and built a business, kind of like Cornelius Vanderbilt, and then use that money to make themselves into a railway tycoon. The other option you have is to have your main character be one of the workers that worked on the railroad. So we want to do our characters first, and we're kind of looking around at maybe some of the other names that we've seen, and they don't have to be perfect, but we do want to make them kind of sound like they could have been from that time period. So I'm going to have maybe a John Whopperman, because some of them had very, very long last names. And then I could also have Henry Shack. And you can make up your own names. This part isn't particularly important. It's really up to you. Now, once we figure out what or who we're going to write about, we can kind of think about what our title might be. So if he's a businessman, maybe it would be titled something like building an empire, or a very large business. I think of an empire like maybe like a king rules his kingdom. An empire is something very large and grand, and somebody's in charge of it. So building an empire. And if we're doing a story about a worker, maybe it's something like Working on the Railroad. Have you guys ever heard that song, Working on the Railroad? It's kind of written about this time, and it wasn't a very fun thing to do. The song goes, I've been working on the railroad all the livelong day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Don't you hear the whistle blowing? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? So that song is, and I don't think I sang it correctly, but that song's written about this time, and it was really difficult to work on the railroad, and people that were doing it because they were really poor and they needed the money, but it was an awful, awful job, and it was very difficult and hard, and that song is kind of like they're waiting on that guy, Dinah, to blow his horn and tell them, all right, guys, the day's over, you can stop working now. So we need to kind of think about this. If we are making a story about a worker, they were not very happy and it was not a great job. So your story needs to maybe include some details about that. If you are a businessman and you are building this empire, you know, maybe have some details about all the people that you have working for you and what they have to do in order to make this happen. Okay, so you guys are going to figure out what you're going to do here. Author, of course, is yourself, your first and last name. I'm going to put mine. Okay, and then I want you to think about the major problem. So there's got to be a problem for your main character, and there has to be some sort of a solution or how everything turns out. A solution doesn't always have to be that everything turned out fine, but we do have to have an ending that wraps it all up and lets us know what happened in the end. You can't leave us hanging. So think about your problem and your solution first, and then that will help you. Just write one sentence, just really simple, one sentence. How is your story going to begin? So are we starting off poor? Are we starting off rich? Are we starting off in New York City? Where are we beginning our story? And then what happens in the middle? Does he take a job? Does he get a loan? What's going to happen that pushes our story along? And then our ending is kind of tied in with our solution. How does everything turn out in the end? So one sentence for each of these: problem, solution, beginning, middle, and end. You can work by yourself. You can work with a partner. You can work with anyone in your group. And you can have the same answers for all of this. You can work together. All right, so go ahead and complete this. When you're done, I need you to go ahead and take a picture of it and upload it to Canvas for me. And then you're all done. Thank you for joining me.